evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and start the October 3rd meeting of the Urbana Sustainability Advisory Commission. Scott, will you please call the roll?
Stacy Gloss.
Here.
Morgan White. Andrew Stump.
Here.
Tomas Delgado.
Here.
Grace Wilkin.
Here.
Jessica Lemcool.
Here.
Luke Westalker.
Here.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We have got a few housekeeping items to review from the previous months. First on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the April 4th meeting. You would have received the minutes in your agenda packet. Is there a motion to approve the April 4th minutes?
I motion to approve the April 4th minutes.
Second from Grace.
Okay, that's great. Is there any discussion or changes requested for those minutes? Not hearing any, we could go ahead and take, do we have to do a roll call vote still for
I can't
approval?
remember, but no?
No?
Okay.
Okay, all in favor of approving the April 4th minutes, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. All right, the next minutes in the agenda packet are from June 6, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the June 6 minutes?
So moved. That's Grace.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tomas. Is there any discussion or requested changes to the June 6 minutes? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from June 6, 2023, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Motion passes. We'll move into the public input part of our meeting this evening. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission and public input, please let me know. Alrighty, we will move on. We have a couple of presentations this evening. First, we have a presentation this evening from Andrew Wren, part of the Prairie Rivers Network, to provide some updates about Prairie Rivers Network programming happening in our area and ways to get involved. If you'd like to come up to the table. Great. Are those loaded? Perfect.
Please be sure your microphone has that green button on and you can pull it closer to you.
Okay. How is the audio? Okay, cool. Let me just get these maximized. Okay. Hey, everybody. Andrew Rain with Prairie Rivers Network. I'm the Director of Climate Policy. We're located over in Champaign on State Street, but we work statewide, and I hope that you're all familiar with us because we do a lot of sustainability-focused work all around the state. So hopefully we've crossed paths. But happy to be here, give you all an update on where we're going. We've had a number of exciting changes in the last year with a new director, and we're onboarding 3 people right now. We've got another one coming on soon. So I think pretty quickly a lot of what I talk about will be a smaller fraction of the total work that we're doing, which is great because I'm excited to be part of Prairie Rivers as we grow a little bit. So our mission is to protect water, heal land, and inspire change. And that really kind of covers the 3 parts of our work. We think about the water, the land, and the people and the networks that we need to develop to make the changes that we need. So we like to keep it pretty simple there, but also really think about how everything is connected to each part of that. Just briefly about me, got a master's and a bachelor's of civil engineering here at the University of Illinois. That's my family on the left, and there's my little niece. I'm not actually a huge Illini fan. My family is, but I really don't care. But it was just a nice picture of my family. I've been at Prairie Rivers Network since 2015, and just recently became the director of climate policy there. So exciting new roles and responsibilities, and I've got little icons down there expressing some of my interests, and you can guess at what they mean. So Prairie Rivers Network has been around for 56 years now, and we've taken on many different forms over that time. We weren't always called Prairie Rivers Network. Started out fighting dams as a bunch of grad students got together following the first, why is this word slipping my mind? Climate, green, what am I? In the 70s, okay, never mind. Anyways, a bunch of people got together to fight dams, and they stopped a number of dams, including the dam that would have drowned Allerton and the dam that would have drowned the Middle Fork. And those fights take a long time, but that's sort of where we got our start, was stopping major dam projects that are destructive and would have destroyed a lot of our natural resources. And from there, we moved on to a number of different forms. At one point, we were called the Central States Resources Center, and we fought landfills. And at some point, we transformed into Prairie Rivers Network. And our work has grown and changed over the years, even while I've been there. I'm on our energy program. We also have an agricultural program and sort of a rivers and habitat program. Those lines are sort of loose and changing as well. So as the work changes and grows, so do we. So we're in a moment where we need to be really thinking about the interconnectedness between all of the pieces that climate change is threatening, and what we need to do to protect our water, our habitats, and biodiversity in order to make it through the climate crisis. So we're thinking about climate change in terms of renewable energy, just transition, cleaning up the legacy waste, making sure that as we move away from fossil fuels, we don't leave behind a mess for future generations. We're also thinking about water quality, water quantity, who has access to water, and the fairness around that. And then biodiversity, making sure that our wildlife and our natural spaces also survive the climate crisis and are able to thrive, and that our solutions to the climate crisis are tolerable with also protecting biodiversity. So that pollution part is a big part of where I got my start. The Middle Fork and coal ash is a big part of what I did initially at Prairie Rivers Network and still do. There's a number of different parts of the coal ash work. I'll go into that in a bit. Also, coal mining is another, we've worked on that for a very, very long time, and currently are working on a mine, the Pond Creek mine down in southern Illinois. Also abandoned mine lands and all the abandoned mine lands that we have in Illinois, and the resources that are now kind of flowing in to fix all of those, and the opportunities there. So just on the Middle Fork, this is somewhat close to home. If you're not familiar, the Middle Fork of the Vermilion River is Illinois' only national scenic river. It's located just over in Vermilion County, not far from here. If you haven't paddled it, I highly recommend. It's a really wonderful experience. If you don't like paddling, you can get in a tube and float down the river, or you can just go to one of the sandbars and wade into the river. But it's really something special and magical to see, and the National Scenic River designation really stands out for a river in Illinois. It's, again, the only one in Illinois. There are very few in the entire region of the Midwest, so it's really a state treasure and something special. And in addition to being saved by fighting that dam that I mentioned, the Middle Fork is also threatened by coal ash impoundments, and this is these are what you see here in the center is a coal ash impoundment, and behind it you can see the power plant that made all of that coal ash. And it should give you a sense of scale and the amount of waste that is generated when power plants burn coal for 60 years and dump their coal ash into these impoundments. The river is there on the left a little bit, and I'll be able to show it to you better in the next picture. But coal ash is a source of pollution. I could go on for hours about this, but to keep it short, it impacts the groundwater. That groundwater can flow into surface water, so we have threats to both the groundwater, also to the Middle Fork. And the location of this coal ash in particular is dangerous because it is so close to the river that is actively meandering that in the long run, if this isn't dealt with and cleaned up, we would have coal ash in our national National Scenic River. Another look, the river is kind of coming around here, around a bend on the right side of the image. There's 3 coal ash ponds there, and we have been fighting to get this cleaned up for a long time. The company that owns it, Dynegy, we've brought multiple lawsuits against them. The state brought a lawsuit against them. This all eventually built up to a settlement agreement that was signed this year between the state and Vistra, where they will be committed to moving their coal ash out of the floodplain of the Middle Fork and demolishing the power plant, building a landfill where the power plant was located, and putting all the coal ash in that landfill. So this is a very exciting victory that we've been able to accomplish in recent years, but it's also going to take us about 10 years for this to all happen, if not more. So the work of protecting a river kind of never ends, but we're excited to announce the victories that we're getting along the way. Coal mining, we worked with Stand Up to Coal for over a decade to fight the Bulldog mine that was going to be in Vermilion County as well. And that mine, last year, we were able to declare victory in that fight against the mine. We're also working right now on a mine in southern Illinois where they want to build a 12-mile pipeline to dump their highly chlorinated water into the Big Muddy River. Illinois EPA just gave them the sign off on that a few years ago, and we challenged the permit. And this one's an ongoing fight, working on it as of today even. This again, we get these victories, but there's always another mine to fight in Illinois. Transition takes a long time to clean energy. So we also work on policy. You probably heard of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. We passed that in 2021. It was nation-leading climate legislation, and we worked with the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition to help pass it. Our role is in the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, which is a massive group of environmental groups in the state, is to be a voice of downstate. And we're also leaning into the network side of our name, major organizers inside the coalition, helping do the strategic planning and the network building to make sure that coalition is healthy and functioning, so that we're getting bottom-up input, clear leadership, good policy development, having the conversations we need to have in order to not just pass things like CEJA, but also pass whatever the next climate bill may or may not be. I may have named it 3JA if it happens, but we'll see. And that joke only makes sense if you know that there was a Future Energy Jobs Act, FEJA, before this, and then CEJA, and then 3JA. Anyways, and I think I'm probably running, I don't know how I'm doing on time. Okay, cool. CEJA does a ton of great stuff. There is, obviously, the goal is to get us to 100% renewable energy in Illinois by 2050. So it builds a ton of renewables. It also is decarbonizing our power sector in the meantime. So we have closure dates for power plants that burn fossil fuels in the state. We have closure dates for every single power plant, except for potentially one. And those go from now to 2045. So it depends on the type of power plant. So coal is all supposed to be closed by 2030. And then natural gas gets phased out over 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, depending on how dirty it is. The only exception really to all of this is going to be the Prairie State Power Plant, which is the 7th largest single source of carbon emissions in the state. And in addition to that, it is, of course, spewing out other pollutants that coal-fired power plants do. And that power plant is potentially going to be, the Prairie Research Institute is working on putting carbon capture technology on the power plant. And if they get that technology, they could run for as long as they want if they're able to capture enough of their carbon. So that doesn't stop any of the other pollution that comes out of a massive power plant like that, and it doesn't stop the coal ash production. That is going to be an ongoing problem. So lots of imperfect law that doesn't fully get us there, but it does do a lot in the path of decarbonization. It also focuses on energy community reinvestment, so giving back to those communities. Important things like energy efficiency, which is if we're going to get to 100% renewables, we need to be using our energy better, and energy efficiency is the best way for us to actually reduce our energy demand and meet the increased demand that will come from things like EVs, et cetera. Very equitable, focused on workforce training. There's gonna be hubs coming up across the state, including one in Champaign County, in Champaign itself. which I don't know if it actually needs to be located in the city of Champaign. So it could also be located in Urbana. Various groups are currently applying to run that hub, but there's 13 of them across the state, and their job is to serve what's called equity eligible communities. So areas that are identified through environmental justice screens or an R3 screen that was developed due to the marijuana legislation. And anyways, prioritized areas to help get folks who otherwise have not had access to the clean energy economy into the clean energy economy so they can benefit from this transition. And then a bunch of stuff around EVs and utility accountability, things that are sort of wonky, but making sure our utilities are being ethical, not being ethical. And I'm going to start to skim things here, but we are also working on bringing federal policy benefits to Illinois. So there's two massive federal legislation that's been passed in the last few years, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and then the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a weird thing to call the most ambitious climate law that's ever been passed. But you know, that's how we named it. Thanks, Joe Manchin. And both of these are really game changers, but it takes a lot to make these policies a reality. So implementation is sort of the least focused on in terms of like media attention part of policymaking and development, but it turns out that it's obviously the most important part in the sense of if you don't implement it right, you can pass a bill that does a lot of great things. But if it doesn't get us there, it doesn't get us there. And so implementation is key. And we're trying to bring all these benefits. There's great legacy pollution cleanup in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Tons of funding coming to Illinois, $75 million for abandoned mine land cleanup, which is exciting. And in addition to clean energy resiliency, making clean energy more accessible to communities, a number of electric vehicle benefits. And then the IRA Inflation Reduction Act, which is funded almost entirely through tax credits, is another big policy that is affecting how we work on climate in the state. So lots of grant programs, and like I said, tax credits for investment in various clean energy technologies. This has been interesting. It's been part of the work that's been challenging, is that all of this money suddenly pouring into things like carbon capture or hydrogen means that you have a lot of interest coming in from industry, and that's potentially good, but also it's a real challenge because you have a lot of interest from folks who are there to make money. And so you have to be careful as we pursue climate solutions that we find solutions that are real and beneficial and actually going to get us there. So both these policies are complicated, and CEJA itself is complicated and perhaps not going to meet some of the targets that we'd like it to have met. And you'll probably hear from us about new legislation to try to fix all the flaws that we're in the last go around. So lots of challenges in energy policy, but sticking with it and getting there, hopefully. Another great thing that CEJA did was it brought $40 million annually to energy transition communities. So that's a lot of money to be annually granted to communities that are experiencing a transition, meaning a closure of a fossil fuel power plant, a coal mine, fossil fuel power plant, or a nuclear power plant. And they can get benefits up to 6 years before an announced closure and 6 years after. And this is meant to do things like fill in the gaps that the loss in tax base and the loss in property tax revenue, the gaps that will create when you get a big closure. So that's an ongoing program. The first round came out this year. And I think communities are actually just now getting their money. Not super relevant for Champaign-Urbana, although Abbott might be able to apply whenever they go on their closure, whenever they get on the closure deadline. I think CEJA doesn't close them for a very, very long time. A lot of the smaller power plants and like ones at universities got into the 2045 category. We're also working on those federal laws. So we worked with two groups of communities in Southern Illinois. So Carrier Mills is one of them, and then the other one is Carbondale and Dowell. And we worked with them to apply for some federal money from the bipartisan infrastructure law. We got some great videos that I can share links to later of that work, and that prize money gets them set up to start looking at renewables and finding what finding ways to make renewables happen in their communities, and it also sets them up to apply for the next round. So it sort of builds up as a great opportunity for communities to apply. So in other work, so one of our newest staff members is Nina Struess, and she does work in the Quad Cities area, looking at nature-based solutions for climate and rivers, and how we need to be adapting in order to address changes in climate, and how we can change how we live and coexist with rivers to deal with issues such as flooding, habitat loss. So Nina is working on a project specific in the Quad Cities area. We're also working on resilient ecosystems. So one of the things we do is work on monarchs and building and promoting monarch habitat. So that's sort of a fun, more local focused program. But one of the programs that I'm really proud of that we work on is identifying and tracking herbicide damage to trees. So a number of herbicide drift is where when herbicides are sprayed on farm fields that can drift and it can impact neighboring farm fields. That's the kind of drift that's fairly well understood. Some herbicides will volatilize, and so instead of impacting your neighbor, they will go back into a gaseous form, rise up into the atmosphere, drift, and then when it gets cold, or at nighttime, for example, they then settle. So you're getting herbicide impact on trees that aren't designed, aren't crops that are meant to be resistant to these herbicides. They're just as weak as all the pests, the weeds they're trying to kill. Well, it also affects the trees. And so we're seeing impact of herbicides far away from farm fields. And so, that's it's a real concern. And what I think is exciting is that we're doing the monitoring work at like a really ground level. We're one of the first groups really raising this issue of documenting herbicide damage across the state. And just this summer, we went and tested a number of trees in the Champaign-Urbana area. And every single one of them had impacts from one or more of these herbicides. And the damage, once you know what the damage looks like, you'll see it everywhere. It's not like super obvious to an untrained eye, but the cupping that you can see on tree leaves is one of the indicators. But we're seeing damage everywhere. Some of these are located near schools. So herbicides are really getting around, and we're trying to raise the volume on this issue. So you'll be hearing more from us over the next year or two about this problem. So what else do we do? We go into communities, we talk to them, we host meetings, hear from them about things like renewable energy. In the build up to CEJA, we did the Listen, Lead, Share program, where we went to communities and talked about what their vision for the climate future was for their community. Once the bill passed, we've been telling people about the benefits and how they can access those. And now we're talking about also what's in the federal laws and bringing those benefits to communities. We're also trying to tell stories and change how we think about these issues. So telling the story of transition and downstate communities that often get left behind or left out, and making sure that they're included in the energy transition. And here's, I think this is, I believe, from the photo here is from Urbana. Yeah, this is Amanda was just out with Scott and maybe some of you on the solar panels here in Urbana on our landfill. And we're just trying to make sure that folks know about the transition and what's there. We work to educate our leaders. So up in the top left, we have Mike Marin, who's the legislator in Vermilion, a Republican legislator in Vermilion County, who is a big champion of our Coal Ash Pollution Prevention Act that gave us coal ash regulations across the state. So we go to Springfield, we'll talk to people, educate them, make sure that they know what challenges there are for our waters and for energy and climate in Illinois. And then we also do a lot of actions, going to Springfield for lobby days and marches and those sorts of things. How can you help? You can join us, or members of the Urbana community can always join us. So the way a membership organization works is that the impact that that you have when you join us is well, one, supporting us, of course, but also you'll hear from us and find opportunities. So if we don't have an opportunity right now, we'll have opportunities soon about an action you can take, a comment letter you could participate in or just sign on to, a trip to Springfield you could join in on. So just getting connected is really the best way to support organizations like Prairie Rivers Network and all of our wonderful partners that work on these issues across the state. And so that's what I have for you today. Lots of potential things to talk more about, but happy to take questions on anything in the slides or anything else.
Thank you so much for the informative presentation. It looks like y'all are doing really comprehensive work in a lot of different environmental areas across the state. I'll open it to see if any of the commissioners have comments or questions. Grace?
Thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation. I have to say that, yeah, I'm so excited to hear from you. Thank you so much for coming. Prairie Rivers Networks, and even you personally, like some of my local heroes for sure. I've been following the coal ash and even spoke at some of the Illinois EPA hearings years and years ago, been following that issue and teaching it in my undergraduate classes for the past 4 years as a case study of the Vermilion River coal ash, and was so excited to see that it changed, that there's an update. Like, that was just amazing. So thank you so much for keeping things in line, and it's unfortunate that it does fall on organizations to organize themselves and to do this. It's not part of the built system in our society. So I really, really appreciate that. I had one thought, and then I do have a question. Just random thought about, as we're closing down power plants, I was thinking about all those reverse osmosis systems and using that to still filter water as a useful thought. But my question is, if you had anything in particular, I appreciate sharing how we can participate in the network, if there was any thoughts in particular with the SAC or Urbana and Prairie Rivers networks that you had as partnership ideas or any kinds of things.
With this committee?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know, so the that tree issue, a local one, we can definitely let you know what our next step is there. I think we're going to be trying to raise that issue again sometime soon. On the Middle Fork, so, again, I could have talked about these things for a long time. The next step is actually another big public hearing. So they have to propose to remove the coal ash, but the way they do it is still through our permitting process. And so we're gonna have a big hearing on the Middle Fork sometime between now and the next future. Unfortunately, we don't have firm deadlines on things, but I actually do expect this one to be somewhat soon. So, you'll hear from us on that. I know that's not exactly local, but I know a lot of Urbana residents treasure and use the river out there. So, that's some ideas. I think probably if you want to connect by email, that would be a good way to kind of follow up and sort of come up with other ideas with the staff.
Great.
I'd be interested to hear what you think as well, as like how does the committee work with organizations in the state or local?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions?
I also
Let's go
wanted to
ahead.
say thank you so much for coming in. That was incredibly interesting, and I have been following you, maybe not as closely as Grace, but I think I get emails from y'all, and I think it's great work that you're doing. A question that I had about the herbicide, something that, I know that the state tests our water, but I was just wondering, I know that they have kind of different thresholds, sometimes shifting thresholds that have allowable chemicals, and I'm just wondering if you all do any of that kind of water testing work. I mean, obviously that's something that's very important to you.
Yeah, so we haven't done, we don't do a lot of on-the-ground testing. That's why the herbicide program is exciting to me, because it's getting us into some of the science that I would love to do more of. But we do water testing. Like, we tested the Middle Fork when we were bringing the lawsuit because we need to do that. But we don't really just kind of do random testing type things. We did recently make comments. The Illinois EPA is reviewing their water quality standards in a process called the Triennial Review, which sounds like it's out of a Harry Potter, but they're updating, they review their standards and see what needs to be updated. And one of the comments we told them was, yeah, there aren't water quality limits on a lot of herbicides. So we actually don't have numbers to say how much of a particular herbicide is allowable in our water. So that's one, that's a step in the process of protecting our health is coming up with limits where then we can look to polluters and say, hey, here's a limit that you have to meet.
I also wanted to say thank you as you were flipping through those Climate Action Now pictures. I realized, so we came up with these like Jedi goals to do different things. And one of the things was at my school, I was going to try to do like an Earth Month thing. And one of our culminating events was taking students, and we went with y'all.
Oh, great.
So
Yeah.
that's how
Okay.
I
Yeah.
recognize those shirts. I can't remember the lady's name, but she's down in the center front of the bus.
Okay, that's a ways back.
Yes,
But yeah, I know what you're talking
texted
about.
my friend, like, what was her name?
It's probably Cindy. Cindy Shepard?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Cindy. So
Cindy's
anyway.
with Faith in Place. She's a wonderful partner. One of the best parts about working in the environment in this, I don't know, in this state, or just, I guess this is just my work, so I'm familiar with it, is we work together so well. The networks are really strong, and we really collaborate with partners a lot. So, yeah, where was that
Pretty
picture?
awesome. I think it was right towards the end.
Okay.
But yeah. It was a really great day. So
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. Well, thank you for joining. Oh, there it is. Yeah, yeah.
All right, are there any other questions from members of the commission?
Andrew, the landfill that's going to go on the power plant site to
Yeah.
hold the coal ash, does that become a hazardous waste landfill? What do you know what class?
I don't know. I'm going to answer off my gut, which is that many years ago, the US EPA decided that coal ash is not hazardous waste.
Oh.
So, no, probably not
Okay.
that particular designation, but it's not going to be an MSW, municipal solid waste landfill. The coal ash landfills seem to kind of fall in their own bucket called coal ash landfills, although landfill regulation is, the distinction will mean nothing to the public, but I'm used to coal ash impoundments and have done less with coal ash landfills, and so the regulations are a little bit less familiar to me. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that plays out. But
it's on
it'll be a
higher
modern landfill. It's elevated out of the floodplain, and it's a modern landfill. So compared to where the current impoundments are holes dug in the ground filled with coal ash. I mean, it's literally, that is not a treatment facility. The landfills will be lined, they'll be capped when they're done, and they'll have, drainage, like treated drainage, and they won't allow them to get wet, and they'll be operated in a way that is far more protective than the ponds. So unfortunately, there's no great solution for coal ash or a lot of other waste products. It's kind of like, everything's bad, you just find your least bad one.
It's a great improvement what you've gotten done there.
Oh yeah, it's huge improvement. But I always struggle with now it's just going somewhere else to be another challenge event. All liners fail over time. You can, if we could make the waste not appear, it would be great. But we're not there.
But here we are. It's our mess to steward forever.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody else made money making it.
And then we could talk to our neighbors about putting solar panels on it.
Yeah.
You'll have to
We like to do
convince
that on our
Vistra to put solar panels on it. But in 10 years, I'm down to have that conversation with them.
Right. You may know that Urbana has a tree commission, and Urbana is a Tree City USA designated city. I can't speak for other commissioners, members of other commissions as well, but I do feel like the issue with how much pride we take in our street trees here in Urbana, that seeing the damage from herbicide drift and being able to diagnose that may be something that the community would be interested in learning more about, and I would really welcome being kept in the loop about any progress and developments in the project that you're working on for educating people around herbicide drift. I also can't help but feel like, well, just because the trees are getting it, all the we're breathing it, right? Of course. So that it's a concern about air quality, outdoor air quality for residents, and I think an area that ends up overlapping on the energy side, especially on energy efficiency, is where outdoor air is brought in from the outdoors as makeup air when we have these really energy efficient systems. That's great, but in order we talk about, improving indoor air quality by bringing in outdoor air. So when the outdoor air is unhealthy, we have an issue with, well, maybe we don't want to be bringing in the outdoor air. So we just need to kind of think holistically about how, I don't know, how our housing policies, our building policies, our environmental policies are all sort of aligned to protect not only the environment, but human health as well. So thank you for your work and thank you for your presentation here. I'm really glad that you were able to make it here tonight, and I look forward to hearing more in the future.
Thanks, everyone.
Just getting back to the agenda. So this evening we have a second presentation from, the name is not on this presentation, I apologize, but from JR with the Champaign Public Health Department, who's going to be talking about findings and reporting back from a local food summit. I think it's an issue that everybody here on this commission is certainly concerned about in our community, in terms of making sure that people have access to local and healthy foods. So welcome, and thank you for speaking with us this evening.
Hi. Hi, thank you for having me. Sorry, there's something in my throat. Thanks for the nice introduction. My name is JR Lill. I'm the Community Health Plan Manager for Champaign and Vermilion County. I work technically for United Way. They pay my salary, but my position is funded between healthcare agencies, the health departments, the mental health boards, United Way, and the OSF and Carle Hospital over Champaign and Vermilion County. So I do work in both counties. So I work to develop, support, and assist and maintain the community health plan and the I-plan filed to the state IDPH, and the community health needs assessment to the IRS for the hospitals. So that's a mouthful, but that's kind of how I came to this work here. So through that work, we have, I'll kind of explain this a little bit. The I-plan has work groups in Champaign County, and one of those work groups is Healthy Champaign County, which originally was formed to address obesity in Champaign County and has kind of moved away from directly addressing obesity, since it's such a complex issue, towards splitting its efforts into food environments, so things like nutrition, access to foods, promoting food security in our area, and then also active living, which we classify as any sort of non-sedentary movement for the whole population of Champaign County. So we want to be able to bring good habits to people of Champaign County. So for the Food Summit, in 2019, I was not here, but the Food Summit, there was a planned Food Summit for April 2020, and for obvious reasons, COVID-19 postponed that. That was not the time to have large gatherings of people, so they chose to postpone. That original summit was a partnership between CUPHD, the Land Connection, Solar Gratia Farm, and the University of Illinois. So pick up to 2022. Last year, I start hearing about this need for addressing food security in our area. And so we started to convene. We brought together local experts from all of the above listed, as well as University of Illinois, Farm to School Network. Let's see, we had a bunch of interns, and our goal was to try to get this community conversation off the ground. Everybody in our circles were talking about food security, but we didn't know what anybody was doing, really. We kind of heard whispers here and there. So the goal was to get everybody together and try to see where we're putting grant funding, what strategies are working, and what are the big barriers that we're missing out. So we brought together about 89, that number is questionable, but I'd say between 80 and 110 folks. I swear it's more than 89. For a day-long conference at the City View in downtown Champaign to talk about food access, collaboration, and discuss how we can better work together. So from that, let's see. Is this showing up well? Okay, shows up, okay. So just a food security overview. The United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, defines food insecurity as a lack of access at times to enough food for an active and healthy life. And so breaking that down, using census data and definitions of food security data from the USDA, we see that about 9.53% or 19,620 people in Champaign County are food insecure. And so that is a big number, but on the flip side, it means that we have about 90% of folks here that are actually food secure. So that's something to be, that's good. We want people to be food secure, right? So it is a small portion, but that also means that we can address that small portion. We're at a good place right now. People are interested in food. People are interested in supporting food access. And there's grants and movement and grant cycles that are supporting this work. So this, in my opinion, is a really great time to work on food security. Of the 19,000 folks who are food insecure, about 3,800 of those food insecure people are children. So kiddos under 18, and so we want to lower that number for sure. So 3,800 is a pretty, I mean, if you had 3,800 kids, that's a lot of kids to deal with. But it's a pretty small number to address. And so we're really close here to making some very long-term sustained efforts. So if we look at it by race and ethnicity, same thing we'll see here. For most every category, we have fairly low numbers. So about just over 20% of black persons of all ethnicities are food insecure, 16% Hispanic persons, and 9% food insecurity rate among white non-Hispanic persons. So there's an, I think, an obvious disparity there. Just over, what is that? Just over twice as many black people are food insecure compared to white people in our community. And almost double Hispanic. Okay, so what did we do? We got all these people together, 89 people together in a room. And in the morning session, we did let's do a crash course on food security, get as much information out from our partners and people designing the summit out into the room so that in the afternoon session, we could have breakouts where we discussed and where we came up. We basically did the community engagement piece where we wanted to identify barriers, solutions, and some actions to take. So as you probably are not surprised by, some of the big barriers are limited staffing, limited funding. Let's see, there was one other one I wanted to speak about. I think those are the two big ones. And then, right. So one of the largest things that we were having issues with is that most of the work in food security is crisis-bound innovation. So there's an issue that we're reacting to, and then once that issue is solved, the Band-Aid's put on and we don't worry about it until there's another issue with food security. Right. And so there's also some discussion about prioritizing conventional agriculture and figuring out how to grow diverse crops needed for healthy diets. To bring local food to people. So some solutions that we came to, developing mentorship plans, understanding the cultures, the different cultures of our community, and learning about the foods that they like to eat. So when you go to the store, not everybody wants to cook broccoli, not everybody wants to cook potatoes. Some people want okra, some people want a bunch of other different things. So you want to make sure that you have options for those people to eat. There's a lot of different solutions listed. So centralized volunteer pool came about. Also, we had heard a lot of discussion about data sharing between agencies. So a lot of hope here. Some of the actions that were suggested we're working towards addressing and making into reality. So as I was saying, planting regionally appropriate crops, having plans for mentorship and education program. We have the University of Illinois here. We have all of our school systems here. Programs like the YES program where we can have high school students working on these things. We can have undergraduate interns working on these things, graduate interns, right, et cetera. So we use that, and volunteers. We use these people to help us grow, help us develop as a community. A lot of the, as you all may know, a lot of the challenges in community organizing or developing a new project comes because of position changes where somebody is the leader in an area and then they leave their position and they're no longer allowed to work in that area. So having things like succession plans, what were your ideas and how can we transmit that to your replacement or to other members of the group so we can carry that on is vitally important for all members of community organizations, in my opinion. So writing a succession plan is good. You should do that. Everybody should do that. Another big action was creating a food access and security plan to present to community representatives. So we're actually working on that for this next year's summit. And I believe that we're planning to have this sort of food access and security plan as we have each food summit coming. We're planning to do this as an annual food summit. As we have it each year, we'll develop a food access and security plan for the community. A lot of folks were interested in hearing different voices. So one example of when you set up a conference, you're always thinking, who's not at the table? At our food summit, we had some representation from grocery stores. We didn't have any representation from food distributors. So for going forward, we definitely want to see what are the gaps and barriers in food distribution directly to grocery stores. We had representatives from Common Ground Food Co-op who do a lot of local food procurement, but we did not, for example, have Schnucks or Walmart or any of the other large produce distributors, honestly. So that's something that needs to be developed and understand, or at least have some sort of community group centered around that. Let's see. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of those actions. So in sort of discussing all of the actions and getting together as a group and figuring out what are the things that are most important to pay attention to right now. Everybody in every one of the work groups identified food transportation and storage as a main challenge for providing food access to community members. So food transportation storage, so that's having delivery trucks that are refrigerated, having cold storage, having freezers, having food safe kitchens, certified kitchens is a big, community kitchens, there's a need there. There are some, but there's a need for more. And then having land access to grow diverse and healthy foods. So that's kind of, it's funny, those first two are very simple, and then the land access to grow diverse and healthy foods is way more complicated because that deals with land ownership. It also deals with what does it mean to have diverse foods and what does it mean to have healthy foods. So that's something that we're all trying to learn as a community together. And then something that needs to be addressed vitally is congregate meal sites for seniors. As you all are probably aware, we're having difficulties maintaining that's an understatement, maintaining our senior living homes here in Champaign, as we had the closing of the large nursing home, and actually in Vermilion County as well, they've recently closed their nursing home. And so we definitely need focus. There's people who did a meal delivery for seniors who came to our food summit, and they were having difficulties with this problem. Like, how do we have the food for people to eat, but how do we get it to seniors who need it? There's plenty of folks who need it. And so one of the options that, it says from partnerships, but forming partnerships with existing restaurants. I know in the past there's been voucher systems where a restaurant will get reimbursed for serving seniors as this congregate meal site. So that's an option as well. Okay, so coming to the 2024 Food Summit, we're doing it a little bit different this year. So last year we did info sessions in the morning, and then we did a discussion breakout session in the afternoon. Now we're doing the info sessions as a lead up as monthly info sessions. We'll have a couple on different topics surrounding food security. Of all sorts, that's currently in development. So I think at the end of October, we should have one ready to go. And then starting in November, we're hoping to have 2 each month up until April at the Food Summit. And we're currently organizing. So if you're interested in joining our team of Food Summit organizers, you can contact me. You can probably contact Tomas, but I'll let him say that for you. And we can work together and make this into a really great thing for our community. Just to end here, I want to say that food access is a human right. Everyone should have access to healthy food grown from local farms. Community engagement cannot be fueled by empty stomachs. So some additional recommendations are to provide funding to pay for more local produce to be distributed to people in Champaign County, and encourage the take what you need, share what you can model for community partners engaged in improving food security rates. Thank you. So I'm J.R. Lill. I'm the Community Health Plan Manager for Champaign and Vermilion County. I work for United Way at Public Health. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to this email here, jlill@cuphd, or I can be reached by phone, 872-212-3413. So do you all have any questions or comments? I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability. Thanks. Yeah.
Ellen, thank you for your presentation about local food security and the food summit that just passed and the one coming up in the future. From a community standpoint, one of the things I think on one of the pages was like maybe not the networks not being like fully formed. Where do people go? How do you find out about resources? What would you say right now are kind of the best resources for people that are experiencing food insecurity for accessing local and healthy foods if they're in need?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you have internet access, I think that the best resource currently available is Find Food Illinois. There's a map you can look up and see where the different food places are. We have, as far as like if you need to get food today, you can use the Find Food Illinois tool. I think in our area, there are food pantries open every single day. And also there are mobile markets open every single day. So that's split up between a bunch of different organizations. So that's a little bit of a more challenging, as far as having one resource tool. Usually they're all listed in the Find Food Illinois website. We have the Public Health Department currently is running in partnership with Sola Gratia Farm and actually the Channing Mary, the Bucket Brigade. We're doing a Little Free Market on Fridays, which is a pop-up market over on Colorado and Philo. And so each Friday from 1 until we run out of food, we bring food donated from County Market, fresh produce from Sola Gratia, and then usually Red Herring will make sandwiches or pasta or some kind of like actual meal for people to eat there. And so the way we do that is form a line, they request their produce, they request whatever they want in shelf-stable goods, and then we definitely practice the model of take what you need. So if people ask, can I have 2, can I have 4, we say yes. We usually have more food than we need, and at that we call that the Little Free Market, and there we probably serve each Friday about 60 folks, depending on the time of the month for other like food resources.
Are there other questions?
You mentioned certified food safe community kitchens. Do we have any of those in the community, or like what would be an example of that?
That's a great question. I must admit I'm not super knowledgeable on that specific part of it. I do know in order for it to be food safe, it has to be approved by Public Health. You need to have a 3-panel sink, which seems like a small thing, but it is an actual hurdle to get over. And you need to, so I shouldn't say more because I'm not exactly knowledgeable on that, but I do know that in the past there have been some, and that they, the one that I was thinking of, they did not meet those, standards, so they were not allowed to operate further. So that I will have to look into, and I can get that info back to you all.
All right, are there other questions?
Thanks for the presentation, JR. Apart from food distributors, are there any other stakeholders that you would hope to be part of the summit next year?
That's a great question.
I know we were pretty well represented with food banks, pantries, a few restaurateurs and food researchers, community growers, but are there any other missing stakeholders that definitely should be part of the mix?
Yes, definitely. I would love to see. So in our original design of the Food Summit, we wanted to have more community members or consumers, food consumers that were not necessarily agents of different, community organizations. So members of the public is a group for sure that we would love to have more representation from. I think we had a lot of discussion about, it popped up in a few areas, a discussion of like food forests and I'm blanking on the term, but the having public food available through trees and shrubs and perennial food forests. There we go. And so that sort of thing I'd love to highlight and see. There are in the researcher crowd, we did have a lot of researchers, but there was specific interest in studying the health benefits of eating well, and putting one of our researchers that attended was very interested in trying to suss out how much money in healthcare you would save from eating well, so that you could say, Carle Hospital, look, if you promote this, you guys could save a lot of money, and OSF, you can save a lot of money if you're helping to promote healthy eating. So having that sort of a lens where it's like a project-based, supporting projects that are occurring, is really important. And then I would also love to have more of a youth presence. We didn't really work with the schools very much. I do know that there are active school projects going on. So things like the Farm to School project in Urbana, even in Vermilion County, I'm thinking of Project Success. But there's a bunch of different school-based efforts around promoting local and like even things growing, having growing spaces and having kids like to use those. So I'd love to see that. Maybe even like youth ambassadors as part of the food summit. And then the last thing I'll say is that there was a lot of talk about food policy council. I know that the county government used to have a food policy council. I don't think that still exists, if I'm correct with that. And so it was interesting to hear a bunch of our health administrators advocating for that. So I'd love to see, I think it would be wonderful to host a food policy meeting at the summit, to say this is our reboot of the Food Policy Council. So those are some of the key people and players I'd love to see, especially voices from our community of how are we doing and how can we support you better, basically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jess?
I was going to ask about what kids can do, and just also say thank you, but you kind of already spoke to what the kids could do. So do you ever go into schools and talk about healthy eating?
I have not yet done that, but I would love to do that. I know the Farm to School Network in Urbana is doing that kind of work, and so I would probably plug in with them and try to do that kind of stuff, because I know that they do curriculum kits and they're really working hard to get our local food into school kitchens, for example, which is
super cool.
It's cool. It's difficult, but it's cool.
Is that Solo Gratia Farm in particular
Solo
to reach out to
Gratia,
for that program? Right?
For the Farm to School? You could talk to the Public Health District. I think they run the grant. Urbana Schools have a portion of, there's a grant agreement between CUPHD and the Urbana Schools for the Farm to School, and then Solo Gratia and Solidarity Gardens also organize that. But yeah, you could talk to Tracy Barkley, Jennifer Lawton at CUPHD, or I'm blanking on the other person's name.
It's a really good start.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my final question is sort of focused more around the policies aspect.
Sure.
And it's more future oriented. So as you're going into the 2024 planning, I would be interested in learning if there are any policies or best practices that municipalities or counties should be enacting in order to make access easier in some way, or if there are any policies or practices in practice right now that are making it more difficult that need to be addressed in our communities. So I was interested in when you were talking about maybe the policy roundtable at this event, how could our local leaders be change makers for, I guess, positive changes in our communities?
Yeah, I think that I know that there's a lot of work going around the Farm Bill right now. A lot of discussion around there. I would love to help answer that question. Immediately I'm thinking that is a great question for us to answer just as a summit as a whole. How do we, Because that's ultimately what we're saying is, at the end of it, we're saying we need to do these things. And then from the city end or from the local municipality, it's like, well, we agree, but what are our steps? Like, we need that as well. So I agree. I think I'll have to bring that back to our organizing team, and we'll definitely work that in.
Great, JR, it was a pleasure having you here tonight. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is our staff report.
Good evening, Commission. First item I have on the staff report is a note that the Urbana Park District is hosting a series of events for Climate Action Week this week. We will be hosting an in-person solar power hour Thursday at 6:30 p.m. at Papa Del's upstairs as part of Climate Action Week. I've got some notes in here about electric vehicle charging. We had talked at previous meetings. The city had published an RFP to solicit a vendor to build, own, operate, charge, decommission charging stations on city property with a license or a lease. We had one response from that RFP. That developer's proposal was dependent on a grant. They did not win that grant, and so that effort is closed for the moment. There are some other efforts going on. The federal government is funding state plans to deploy electric vehicle charging stations along interstates. I understand there's going to be, the state of Illinois has their plan approved, and I presume the money is flowing, but I've been told that program has some other phases that will be funding charging stations in different ways. Also, it's interesting to note that the state has passed legislation that requires EV infrastructure in new residential properties. So, in terms of having good electrical infrastructure for new construction, that is taken care of. And I don't know if I put it in here. Yeah, I did. There is a Department of Energy website that shows, and you can download and sort the data in an Excel spreadsheet, but shows all the EV charging stations, at least the ones that they know about. And I've looked at this a couple of times, and I put a note in there. I looked at it last year, and the number of stations in Champaign County has almost doubled in a year. So pretty interesting to note. And then I also have a note there that like your mobile phone, most EV charging is going to happen at home overnight.
Just a comment, Scott. I think the county is also interested in EV charging.
Yeah, Champaign County? Okay, great.
I also have a question. So you said that the state legislation is about EV infrastructure with new residential construction. Is there anything about like city construction, thinking about the like fire station and stuff?
Not in this legislation, no. No, I think it's just single family and multifamily. Moving on to geothermal Urbana-Champaign, we are one or two contracts short of our next declining price benchmark of 75 tons. I think we were right around 60 or 70 tons the last 2 years. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to close a couple more contracts. We've completed all the geothermal power hours that we had planned. The vendor still has a ton of leads. One of the things that's interesting to note, he's given me the number, but I don't remember it now. But a lot of properties have narrow side yards and utilities in the front yard. And at present, we're not able to get a drill rig into the backyard to drill geothermal wells for those properties. But geothermal companies are generally full-service HVAC companies, and they've been able to convert a lot of these houses. I think it was over 10 this year from methane gas heating to air source heat pumps rather than ground source heat pumps. And that's also good. That's getting the natural gas out of the heating side of the power bill. And air source heat pumps are 300% efficient in our area. Ground source heat pumps, geothermal, are 400% efficient. So we always start with geothermal as the best option, but air source heat pumps are still a really good option if wells are not possible at the particular property.
And Scott, I think John's giving a presentation to the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association in November about the 3 group buy programs he's involved in. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming he'll promote the Urbana program.
Yeah. So we've really started something here. We've had a couple of rural co-ops take our program, and then a collection of nonprofits in Chicago area are running a bulk geo purchase program. You know, if they can make it work there, that's a lot of scale to crush a lot of methane gas heating.
Actually, John said that their program is so over enrolled that they had to stop it.
Yeah.
Because there was too much demand for the
Right.
amount of.
That's a great problem to have. Yeah. For whatever reason, their drilling prices are higher up there, so, you know, we need to keep plugging away here where apparently we have lower drilling prices. And
Another question on geothermal. I know with the air source heat pump, you can reduce a lot of the natural gas and fossil fuel heating, but you're not going to get rid of it completely. An air source heat pump, to my understanding, can't heat a home through the winter in Illinois. So you still need a natural gas or some kind of heater for below freezing temperatures. I don't know if geothermal is the same.
geothermal, most geo installations have a small electric resistance backup heater, and that comes, you know, that'll come on a couple of, you know, once every few years. It doesn't come on very often. You know, that's when it's 0 degrees for 2 weeks, I suppose. Air source heat pumps can't go quite as deep into those long cold spells as geo, but it's more or less the same principle. It's mostly going to be running on air source heat pump heat most of the winter, and then some supplemental backup heat of one sort or another. Could keep, some people keep the gas furnace as a backup. Others will use electric heat for the backup. Just depends on the scenario. Andy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, John mentions he's had his geothermal system for 20 years or whatever, and he doesn't have a gas.
That's fine. I've had an air source heat source for 4 or 5 years, and yes, the natural gas heater has to come on when it's below freezing.
Yeah.
Pretty much every time,
Okay.
like the whole winter. Yes, that's what they told us when they put it in. That once it's much below freezing, there's no heat to take out of the outside air.
Sure.
So I imagine geothermal is better, but still you're working with 55 degrees Fahrenheit ground temperature. I just don't understand how you could heat your house to like 70 degrees in the winter without another heat source.
It's the same principle, you know, that your refrigerator works on. 55 degrees is enough heat because it's not pumping 55 degrees into your house and somehow that becomes 70 degrees in your house. It's pumping heat and compressing it, so to speak. I'm not a physicist or a chemist to be able to explain that. But yeah, there's enough heat at 55 degrees that you can go pretty deep into the winter. And it's different than air source heat pumps. Because air source heat pumps in the winter are, as you described, trying to pull heat out of the air when the air is approaching 0. Yeah. Andy, do you want to explain heat pumps?
That's the thing, below 20 and above 80 or 90, your air source heat pump's not going to work as efficient, so.
I mentioned we have a solar power hour coming up. We have launched our 8th year of our bulk solar purchase program. I think we're past 5 contracts that's listed here already. We've done some tabling at the market, and the vendor we selected this year, Sangamon Solar, is off and running. doing a ton of proposals and getting contracts signed. And so that's great, and we'll hopefully have another good year. Nice to mention that Stacy Gloss applied for a grant on behalf of the city of Urbana, and sorry, not a grant, an award on behalf of us of the city of Urbana, and we were selected in the American-made Sunny Awards for our community solar project, and scored a cool $2,500 for that. There are subsequent phases of the award, and we're automatically enrolled in those subsequent phases, so we will see what happens there.
And do we have a plan what that money is going towards?
Nope. Got a couple notes about U-Cycle. We have an electronics recycling event coming up. Courtney's also working probably with the Park District again on a composting, a backyard composting workshop. So for folks that have space and are interested, they can do backyard composting of landscape trimmings and or food scrap. And then for others, we've got the Landscape Recycling Center. So we're trying to capture all that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium and put it back to work. There's a note in here, we have our leaf collection coming up, so get your paper lawn bags ready. And then Courtney will be supporting America Recycles Day event again this year. Our next Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting will be December 5th at 7 p.m. I will not be available, but we'll have someone from Public Works call the roll and take the minutes and so forth.
All right, thank you for the staff report. We have some new business items as well. Does anyone first have any questions for Scott about the staff report? Further than already discussed?
Maybe just quick ones. You said, so I appreciate those dates for leaf collection, and it says on your U-Cycle collection day. So meaning whatever day your city recycling is picked up is when they'll pick up your leaves in those windows.
Correct.
Right, okay, thank you. And then I was looking at this America Recycles Day event, Saturday, November 4th. I didn't see a location, or do we register, or what is that?
That's a good question. Probably, let me find it real quick on the city website. We've been doing this for a lot of years, there's a whole lot of past years here. I'll have to find out and email everyone.
That's great, even better, then we'll have it in the email. Thank you.
Okay, and I've got one more question. I know Grace had asked if there were any plans for the award money from the DOE Community Solar Prize. I don't want to like hash out all the possible things that the city could do with $2,500, and I'm not sure that it would be appropriate for us to, spend the time in this meeting tonight, like brainstorming ways. I'm just wondering about using that for, I don't know, or making a recommendation to put it towards supporting further renewable energy type projects in the city. For example, the geothermal systems and the fire stations, or supporting the fire stations through, probably geothermal, but greater energy efficiency or renewable projects for new buildings in the community. Any ideas on that?
Yeah, the fire stations are gonna be multi-million-dollar efforts, and every funding source we can find to contribute to those developments will be great. And the I'm ambitious that those buildings will be constructed as geothermal powered right from the get-go, rather than methane gas heated. That there is a premium to doing that, and the fire stations are actually just one piece, a very big piece, but one piece of a bigger facilities master plan that the city is working on. And the fire stations are not the first. We built a storage facility next to Public Works. You can see there's some remodeling going on in this building, and there's a number of projects that come after the fire stations. And what's important to remember is whatever money gets spent on the fire stations or is left over from the fire stations rolls over or takes away from those subsequent projects. So we're pinching pennies. I'm sure the engineers are pinching pennies to get those fire stations done as cost effective as possible. So yeah, it's a thought.
Part of the analysis that goes into, budgeting for these projects, are there any cost estimates on site operations over the lifetime of the building? So like lifetime operation costs. So for example, for the geothermal systems, okay, upfront additional investment, but with the 300%, now 400% efficiencies that you obtain over kind of an 80% or 95% natural gas furnace type system, what would be the lifetime operational savings for these buildings? And is that a potential justification for making sure that the energy systems in new and modern buildings are built towards maximizing sustainability and renewables?
That sort of thing is done as a matter of course for solar installations because they're just easy to model. But it's generally precise, payback periods or savings are generally not common with geothermal just because there's so many different variables. When we get to, at this point, we don't even have, design specs to give to get a real design for an HVAC system versus a geothermal. So I don't know if we'll see that kind of thing or not. I know that, the geothermal vendors we work with, the solar vendors we work with, every customer gets a payback, savings, a perspective, and a payback period, but that's not what happens with geothermal for reasons that have been explained to me, but I don't recall the specifics.
But you could go off another fire station that has geothermal and get a roundabout estimate.
Would any case studies from the SAC or members of the public help at this point?
It would. I've actually asked for case studies for geo fire stations from the National Association Geo Exchange this week. So we'll see if he's able to bring those.
Okay. Any other questions or dialogue? Thank you for going down that path with me for a couple minutes there. All right, next on the agenda is, not looking at the agenda, the carry-out bag fee. Grace, are there any updates about, or is it to Scott? I'm not sure at this point whose ball is in what court when it comes to the carry-out bag fee in the community. So comments on that?
I'd say some things, and then, that's kind of my question to Scott as an update. My recollection, understanding from when this came to council was that Scott gave us a follow-up presentation after the SAC recommendation. I think it was really unfortunately misinterpreted by city leadership that Scott came back and said, well, we could do this if SAC met only quarterly instead of once a month, or if he stepped back from the geothermal bulk buy program. That's not what I intended at all. I meant to expand the capacity for city sustainability, not have it at sacrificing other activities. I clarified that in some of our other recent meetings with other city leadership, that that's what I meant, because again, I'm looking to expand. I would have liked to say, a part-time person for 2 years, additional staff in your department, and that could make it possible. Or X hours a week or in a month for a certain amount of time, and we could look for interns, we could look for partners with different organizations. I really take issue with how it was phrased as a give or take choice of giving up other sustainability things. We have limited resources, sure, but I am aware that there's at least an extra $100,000 in the recycling fund that could go towards maybe something like this. I think there is money if we make it a priority, and we can look for other partnerships. We have that UIUC, I guess not class, the program with Dr. Green that wants to help and maybe could have like internship possibilities or something. But I think that first we need to be able to agree and understand what is the goal and what is the time and what are the resources that it would take to make that happen. So I guess that's where I leave off my understanding, and I don't know if Scott has any more to add from there.
Yeah, I think the effort requires some resources, whether it's redeploying existing resources or adding new resources as you described. My understanding is going to be kicked back to council in what is maybe a fall goal-making session, and council can decide to spend some resources then and there. Beyond that, I don't know.
Do you have or do you think it would be possible to get a quantifiable amount of resources that it would take to do this? Because it's already in the goals. I don't accept that. It's already in a council goal, and I put it there to explore this. And we've talked about this for the past 2 years. And I understand that that doesn't mean implement it and that we have the money, that's a different step. But I feel like for exploring, I think we've discussed this, we've explored it, but we haven't gotten to a quantitative, this is X amount of dollars or this many staff people it will take to do it. And that's where I would like to leave off the exploration stage so that we could move into thinking about implementation.
I think it depends on what kind of implementation is imagined, but let's just take two extremes to keep it simple. One extreme would be the city decides to do it, just implements it, does the minimum notification to the affected retailers, provides them with the resources, and there's a start date, and we all move on. The other extreme is, more like, say, the Imagine Urbana effort. 18 months or 2-year rollout and education, and we're going to give away a bunch of stuff and a ton of investment in terms of communications and all that. So two extremes. I can tell you from my review of the cities that have done this in Illinois, they're more towards the first. It's pretty straightforward. Maybe the first city or two did a lot more communications and public engagement, but the recent ones that have rolled out a carry-out bag fee have really just taken it as this is a known quantity that lots of cities do, and now we're going to do it, and we're going to do all the communications that we need to do with the affected retailers, but they're not putting the sort of the Imagine Urbana kind of level of effort into it. If the city chooses to move forward on the former, it's substantially, I think, a finance department project of setting up. So, for instance, not entirely unlike the hotel tax that they collect, or a fee, or however it's structured. It's a revenue source that only applies to certain types of businesses, and they have to set it up and collect it and do the check that they've collected it. But it's not a lot different from that. I know finance is hiring someone. I think they're expecting to put them on staff in the first quarter of 2024. And I think that's the person that, you're adding capacity. That person could have a quarter FTE for 9 months to write the rules, come to city council a couple of times, and get it rolled out by some start date. So, if we're thinking of the more minimal rollout, that's not too much other staff time demands on, say, the communications specialist, U-Cycle, Scott, supporting, with some communications. But it's substantially a finance department. In talking to other cities, it seems to be substantially a finance department rollout with some communications support. There was some things that we'd probably have to do over at Public Works, like, doing some data analysis to try and capture, all of the retailers that would meet the floor square footage. And so there's a couple of little efforts there that will require other people's time. But I think the lion's share will probably be in finance.
So did I hear you say that at a minimum, you think it would take a quarter full-time equivalent employee for 9 months?
Off the top of my head,
That'd be guess.
That's
Sure, and I think it would be helpful to redefine that if it does, if I don't expect you to have that answer on the fly, but I think for me that would be the important way to conclude exploration before we can move forward if we don't know what it will take to get there. And you're saying we have a new staff person already coming?
I believe there is an intention, and I presume it will proceed. I'm not looking at documents and just hearing people talk. To hire another finance position that would probably come on board first quarter of 2024.
Okay, and that's in finance. Thank you. But there would still be some work from you, right? But you think it's largely finance?
There was, when we were talking about it, there was a couple of things that Public Works would probably support. So doing some GIS analysis, because I think we're talking about, retail establishments with a minimum square footage, right? So we have to kind of create an initial list, and then that's got to be quality controlled. We may, look at an aerial that says, maybe a big Casey's is going to qualify for the minimum square footage, and we say, well, you qualify, and then we notify them, and they come back and say, well, actually, that our square footage, you're measuring the aerial, but that's wrong. That's our roof line, not our floor line, and our square footage is below the minimum. So there's just some bureaucratic work to be done along those kind of lines, and so. We have a GIS specialist. We have a dedicated GIS specialist at Public Works, so that's a person that might be deployed for that effort. And while that person maybe does the initial analysis, he's probably going to hand it off to somebody else to do the follow-up phone calls and ground truth and that sort of thing, so he can stay working on GIS stuff. So that might be where myself or Courtney come in and put in some time.
Would we not already have some of that data about businesses and all that stuff?
Not really. Yeah, if we don't already have a licensing regime for something, then we kind of don't have the data.
It's not to say that the data isn't existing in some database somewhere. It just hasn't been searched on those search parameters before, I would think, is what you're, yeah, okay.
So, yeah, because I don't have a very firm conclusion for this conversation. Just wanted to keep it alive, give SAC an update. Again, I think, if we can quantify some stuff, that would be good for seeing how we can pull the resources to make it happen.
Thank you for bringing it up, Grace. because I'm also just wondering if the issue is staffing, what about the 10 cents? You know, what if 0.25% goes to staffing, 50% goes to the business, and some other percentage goes to the green alternatives or something like that? So thinking about the tax as a source of paying for the program, because it's really important to get the plastic out of the environment in whatever way we can, you know?
Yeah, so there'll be ongoing costs, which are, you know, again, probably on the scale of collecting the hotel motel fee, which is, you know, fairly, you know, it's a whatever, less than a quarter of an FTE. It's point whatever, and so it's reasonable for that, you know, revenue coming in to pay for that. Separate from the ongoing is just the upfront, which happens before the revenue comes. So you just, and it's, I think when we're bringing on a new person, obviously they're bringing on that new person because they've got work they envision them doing, but it's a good opportunity to utilize that new staff time for a new effort.
I mean, working in a public place myself, I know how overworked we all are. So, you know, maybe this could be something that could be brought up in conjunction with everything else. Obviously, our city is growing. There's going to be more need for more people. And with the environment and everything that's happening to it, there's going to be more need for moving towards more solutions for the problem. So I can imagine that there would be plenty of work for a person to do if the city were down for making that happen. So.
Okay, thank you for those updates. Next, grant program for environmental projects. That's new for me. I haven't been following what that would be.
Yeah, it's kind of new. I don't remember if I mentioned this in a past SAC meetings or not.
I think that was the budget amendment.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Anyway, I'll tell you again. We have $100,000 in the budget for environmental projects that I'm working with grant management department under community development to figure out a process of application and reviewing and selection and the contracts and all the things that go in with a grant process like that. And so just wanted to bring it up here. I think it would make sense for the SAC to maybe review a recommendation from the selection committee. And then also if anyone's interested in being on such a selection committee or being more involved in the process, I think there's definitely opportunity for that. There are some restrictions. I don't think the SAC ourselves is the right place to do that. We don't have the time. That would take us like over a year and the budget would be over. If we're meeting once a month and we have OMA restrictions, we couldn't meet outside of our meetings. I just don't think that's gonna be an efficient way to get it done. So I think it needs to be another selection committee that we're working on figuring out the details. But SAC members would be welcome to be on that in limited numbers. And then I think it would make sense to bring the recommendation for SAC to kind of review and approve before going to council. So that's some thoughts on the structure. And also if there are really great projects that want to apply, lots of talks about fruit trees and community gardens and stuff were an inspiration for kind of getting this money in the budget. And so for people to think about some potential projects that might want to apply. It's just $100,000 total that we're working with here, but hopefully could be successful and continue and grow in the future.
That sounds really cool. So first, congratulations on getting some budgeted funds set aside for environmental projects in our community. I think that that's amazing. In terms of the grant program, is it too early to talk about like details like what would be the max application, like the max amount that an organization could apply for? Or is it for 501c3 nonprofits only? Things like that. What is your envisioned rollout for the time frame for the program? And when do you hope for the grants to be made? and expended by in terms of, reporting and making sure that the proposals that were applied for are done and that the funds are spent well. I know that was a lot, so I apologize.
They're
I
all
could
really
s-
good questions
okay.
that we're still working out. Yeah, I don't really have answers for any of them in particular, but that's what we're working out. And again, with, we have staff that does grants that say they can write grant applications in their sleep. And so, they have a lot of experience with that. And so that's who I'm still working with. And then again, if you want to be involved in that process, we can loop you in on those nitty-gritty planning details. As far as the timeline, it is in the budget for this year, which continues until the end of June of, that'll be 2024. Calendar years or fiscal years, man. So we have that time period in the budget. It doesn't necessarily have to be spent by then necessarily. That's also some of the beauty of this being from the city general funds. A lot of our grants were held to federal and state standards, pretty strict requirements on who can receive funds and in what timelines, what's their reporting requirements. This is city money from the general fund, so I think we have a responsibility to handle it well and make sure that's used effectively, but we're also not bound to a lot of the red tape that we are with a lot of other grant programs. And so even if we didn't spend it in this year, we could make a motion in the budget to roll it over to the next year. So it has a lot of freedoms and flexibility, and then also trying to keep it also structured and similar to other grants, although it does have a little more flexibility.
Grace, maybe we could talk a little bit more about this offline, because I'm wondering if there's a way to leverage the funds and the opportunity by Urbana signaling that they are excited and putting money into environmental projects. If this could be a catalyst or a fund for some matching funds from community partners or community institutions like the University of Illinois, or as a model for, Champaign or Savoy to provide some additional matching. I am envisioning something bigger than probably what Urbana had in mind. And I apologize to staff and staff time in advance, but I know that there have been some challenges in the past in thinking about how, for example, the University of Illinois would be able to invest in some local community projects that offset the carbon footprint of the university. And if they were like, hey, there's a mechanism here for contributing to this fund and for ensuring that the projects were going towards renewable energy, I don't know who's convinced or what budget it would come from, but is there an opportunity to kind of leverage this program to expand the program beyond Urbana's borders? I don't know what the interest would be in that, but I think if Urbana is doing some of the groundwork and the legwork for these community grants for environmental projects, and I hope they could be used for small renewable systems and be leveraged for carbon offsets in some way, that maybe the other community institutions would be interested in partnering, and I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, we could definitely talk more offline. I think we've got to get through this one first. This was not a very premeditated, full, systemically supported thing. This was something I brought up somewhat on the fly. It didn't even have a second the first time, and it completely failed. And then the next week, it passed unanimously for some reason. So I'd say we have to demonstrate that this bold move, I guess, can work first, I think, before we make it a bigger thing. But I think that's absolutely the idea, is to demonstrate that it's a good idea, it can work, how can we make it part of the process moving forward? And I think that, yeah, matching and expanding thing would be a great opportunity down the road. I don't know if the city's the one to do that, but yeah, if we have the capacity, that'd be cool.
Grace, is this something like spending the money on public property to enhance the property? Is that the vision? Or, you mentioned like the fruit trees and stuff. Is that what the idea is, I guess?
I think that's also why we want to take applications, just being sure that it's kind of an open, as fair a process as it can be, because there already have been lots of great ideas. Tomas has been in my ear about the fruit trees for years, and a lot of the groups that we heard from today, and there's, big push for fruit trees and community garden space could be on city-owned land, could be partnerships with park districts, with school districts. It could be, I think the land ownership is just one of the smaller pieces. There's a lot of ideas about for support for community gardens. I remember I've been talking to lots of people who have lots of great ideas, and that's why I'm also trying not to jump the gun and just go with who I've already heard from personally, but kind of keep it open for taking applications. Maybe even from the city, although I don't think that's my main use, but potentially Scott putting one in for a bag fee, or I know that our other public works staff have really been into green water retention and infrastructure and things like that. So I think in my vision, it's not necessarily city projects, but I would love for it to be open. And then even in a worst case, but with a big silver lining, is say we get a whole bunch of applications for all these great ideas, and they would add up to millions of dollars, and there's no way that we could do them all. Then, unfortunately, we'll have a really hard time deciding how we can use $100,000. But we also have a whole list of these other environmental projects that we know have the need and have an organization behind them to execute it. And then I think that's a big push for the future to go to the U of I and say, hey, we got a request for $10 million of environmental projects in the county. You want to pay for that and we'll manage it? Like, I think that would be convincing. So I'm really curious in the application process to also see what we get, because there are a lot of great ideas out there, and kind of just compiling who's interested in doing what.
Yeah, there's some USDA grants for sustainable or for community gardens, but they only pay for certain things, or so that maybe that could leverage some of the funds.
Thanks so much for creating that opportunity for community members to apply for projects that they're passionate about. Wanted to ask if there was any intention that there'd be maybe one recipient awarded, or depending on the viability of other applications, would you maybe divide it up? Or I guess maybe the structure in terms of awarding, were you thinking about one recipient or multiple?
I think in my mind I had multiple, just to spread it out. And a lot of people I've talked to so far, I think, are thinking in that mindset that there's a shared pot of 100,000, and so they're thinking of what project could I request for 20 grand or 10 grand, a clear cut 10 projects for 10 grand each, or 5 for 20, ideal kind of breakdowns. But after going through some of this grant selection process for other grants in the past, that it doesn't always come down that way. But I think the idea is typically to have more than one applicant, and that typically the applicants are kind of aware of that and don't request the full amount of money, or if they do, they're open to it being pared down as needed.
Seeing as we would really benefit from having a lot more applications than money we have to give out, how can SAC help solicit more applications and get the word out? Or how have you been going about that, and how could we help?
Yeah, it'd be awesome. I think first we need to get the application criteria and the application itself and submission forms and all that before the concrete sharing, because then that will be a step where definitely if you have groups to share it with that might be interested, spread the word, as much as you can. People have had a little bit of a bug in their ear just since this idea has been out in the ethos, but it will definitely be more of a time to apply, and we're hoping to have at least a 2-month application window. More than 1 month is just too short for some of this stuff, and to make sure that the community has enough time to prepare their applications. But if there are any groups that are interested, I'd say put it on their radar, is I think unfortunately all the concrete stuff I can give people for now, but there will be application coming soon, hopefully in the next few months.
Yeah, I know on campus there's a student fund for sustainability, and sometimes they have an application that's a really good project, but it's not on campus, and so it's in the community. So that would be a maybe type of project that, and usually pretty small. They're like $5,000 or $10,000. Sometimes they can't fund them because they're not on campus.
Okay, I think we've got one more from Grace, Pumpkin Smash.
Yeah, last thing for me, and I'll leave you alone for now, is Pumpkin Smash again this year. We did it last year. It was a success. It was fun. I think we got 1,500 pounds of pumpkins, or thousands. I'm messing up my digits there, but it was a lot. It was a bunch of pumpkins. And so we're doing it again this year on Saturday, November 4th. from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And Scott and the LRC gave us permission, right? So we're okay with that?
Yep, absolutely.
And so again, this will be opportunity for people like last year to come and bring their pumpkins. We had a little table from the Champaign County Environmental Stewards, the nonprofit that is also hosting this event. We could have more representation from SAC. Last year, we didn't have any particular volunteers from SAC besides myself. We found out we don't have a logo or a banner or things like that or swag or anything, but volunteers are great and information is great. Do we have more stuff?
I do now have a nice tablecloth, like form-fitting around a table with the city logo on it
Nice.
that we can utilize.
Nice, yeah. So if we have some SAC volunteers to run a table for the city and for SAC, I think you had some LRC brochures last year and a few informational things. I don't know if we could do that again.
Yep.
But that would be great. Volunteers would really be helpful. Last year, my spouse and I pretty much ran it. We had one other volunteer for an hour. And it's doable with 2 people, but it would be a lot better and a lot more informative if we could have more people.
Is there table literature for the solar and geo programs? Have a table, we might be able to sort of be like, look at all these environmental programs that the city is
Geo
working
will be
on.
closed.
Geo's closed, okay.
but-
Solar would be open though
Mhm.
that time? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we can include that.
So since we aren't meeting until after this happens, how should we organize that volunteering and stuff? Should we just show up, or what should we do beforehand?
Such a great question. I love it. I think showing up is great, but it can also be hard to find people out there. Can you coordinate that for us, Scott, as far as SAC
Sure.
things? So again, Saturday, November 4th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., anytime in there when you can volunteer. And if
It's not
Scott can be
bus-
our touch point.
I think you all can communicate on that also. I don't think that's business before the commission, you know, it's an event. But yeah, everyone's free to go through me, and the dates and times and everything were confirmed after the agenda was written, so I think yesterday. So Saturday, November 4th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And if you're familiar at all with the LRC, once you go past the booth, there's kind of a horseshoe drive where all the tipping and products are lined up. And if you follow that horseshoe drive, the food scrap bin is the last thing you encounter. And it's a concrete bin. It's the only one out there, so you'll be able to see it. The only tricky thing about this is just managing parking. So if you can carpool or talk to me, and there are some places we can get cars parked that are out of the way. We want to keep the lanes clear for customers coming and going, and also the big pieces of equipment moving around. But that's the only tricky thing about it. Other than that, it's talking to people and having a little fun with food scrap, and hopefully getting people who have never been to the LRC for disposal or for garden products to come out there and see what a great resource that is to be able to buy in bulk and make new customers.
And I'm hopeful that this year we'll have a good turnout. Last year was our first one. Maybe it's happened sometime in history, but at least in a while. And then this year we're on a statewide list of pumpkin smashes, and some people who were there last year will hopefully come again. And I'll have flyers and stuff too, so we can send those out when I make them and share those as well. But hopefully we have a good and even bigger turnout than last year.
Maybe it's a good opportunity to get rid of leftover Halloween candy. Pull out.
Oh, to give away to people, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't want to compost that and
No,
all the
no.
wrappers, Scott. What are you talking about? You don't
No.
even let them have
I would
candles
eat
or
it before
paint
I
on
threw
their
it in the
pumpkins. You want
compost
candy?
bin. No.
Oh, there's rules involved? No candles or paint? Okay, we'll talk about it later, but
That is some of the best, since it's
November-
going into compost, yeah.
is it November 4th, 11 to 4? 11 to 3? So volunteer slots, the last volunteer slot is at 2? And the first volunteer slot is at 11 or at 10:30?
Yeah,
From
sure.
10:30 to 3:30, just mobilization, demobilization.
Okay. I am creating a Google Doc that Scott can share with the group, so if you can volunteer, you could just fill out the Google Doc.
Great, thank you.
Share that after the meeting. Okay. Any other questions about Pumpkin Smash? Alrighty. I have no other agenda items for us this evening. Thank you. It has been a long meeting, but I thought the staff report and the two presentations were great. Really good dialogue tonight. So many events going on this month for Sustainability Week, and the fall semester is always just really busy. So thank you everybody for your time tonight and coming to the SAC meeting. We will have our next meeting in December, and at least one item on the December agenda will be talking about the schedule for next year. So setting the schedule for the 2024 SAC meetings. If you have any agenda items